just like a tele-development actually. So sitting in the campuses, students, bright students are available. I mean, it's a very valuable resource, and they can do research, they can do development, and it's all about making them connected. So the moment you get connected, the average and ordinary becomes, super good actually. I think that begins to create, contribute to value system.
Okay, now let me look at the whole things from the point of view of, let's say, the government or policymakers. The important thing to remember is that education is only in the past 10 years hit the private sector in India, because the demand-supply gap was so huge. For 50 years after independence, it was assumed that the government and the government-run universities were the primary education providers. But now you see a lot of private universities even advertising on MTV and other channels, and some of them, I must say, are dubious. But it only shows that we need a good policy infrastructure. So let me ask Sandeep Biswas on what he thinks about policy makers in the ecosystem of mEducation. Is there something that can be done from the policy perspective?
Well, I think yes and no both. One is if you're trying to bind something using some policy matters or something, then you will find the things will not grow. But at the same time, if you make entire things completely open, then you will find there's a lots of chunks will get sipping. So what is happening today is, both even HRD ministry also very big way into it. They are identifying that typically the domain where you need this kind of mEducation and all that will be very, very critical. I'm not talking about typical, kindergarten to 12 standard or whatever, PG or UG kind of a scenario. Even for that, the segment where you need semi-skilled laborers like carpenters, like masons, and so on. There's a huge demand on this. More and more the country is growing. You need a huge education to fall in place. And whereas Prakash was mentioning, the video will play a huge role. So what we need to define today is that instead of just going and running for the quick bucks and making, investing on those, entertainment-driven mobile, mobile VAS kind of applications, this country requires very serious investment from the operator side or from the people who are getting into that business side to ensure that there's a significant amount of application content is there, and then this same thing is delivered to the students and thereby to the parents, and who are ready to pay money. If there's a quality content and there's a meaningful education is being delivered, people are ready to pay money. So that's not a problem.
I think I get it. Basically, it looks like the government and the larger telecom companies maybe should engage both the policy and the creation of a broad framework. But I think from the content creation perspective, there's a case for smaller companies, smaller investments to create a profusion of content. In fact, let me throw that question to Anurag. If you were a private equity player, it's a very hypothetical question, but I think it's very relevant. Sure. Because startups are needed to fill in some of the key gaps in this system. Where do you think typically the opportunities lie for a new kind of entrepreneurs in education?
I think we've already seen, for example, take the social media revolution globally. I think the globalization of that we've seen to an extent, but we need to see a lot more hyper-localization, referring to when we see an Indian Facebook from a grassroots level. So how can you connect the communities, remote communities, the panchayats, which we already been connected through broadband, but how can we have critical information coming from the mass of from rural and the grassroots, the frugal level innovators who are out there disconnected from the rest of society. So I think it's really about building that competency for the blue-collar workers, as Sandeep was rightly saying. The verticals need to be addressed. But I think it's about also looking at where are the great ideas, the sparks coming from remote parts of the of the country, which can be stitched in together and brought into a platform which can then be delivered for the masses. The best examples, for example, or global examples can be brought into the same platform. So I think it's a framework, as we were saying rightly, that needs to be put together in the right form.
It reminds me of a word called skill-led, which I heard from the NIIT's vice president who was looking at some of the innovation in the education sector, which is that some people are like the Japanese used to have just-in-time system of inventories. Now we are reaching a stage of just-in-time of education where the blue-collar workers that you mentioned are, learning on the go on the mobile devices. So you need to create content, and there are startups that need to address and create that kind of content. That is very interesting.
I mean, there's a range of women self-help groups, for example, which are being empowered by mobile, which are already looking at video content, teaching them specific things about the industry. So I think that type of a sharing of information and knowledge approach needs to be brought in.
Yeah. The other thing, as Prakash mentioned in passing, there is, the small screen business need not be small screen, and let me add that now you have digital projectors being built into mobile handsets. So you're talking even the device gap is being broken in very innovative ways. So you can have a small handset connected to broadband, which is projecting on a screen which is large, and that looks like a real classroom again. Therefore, mEducation, from the point of view of a service provider who creates a projection-based classroom, to another service provider who creates content for the blue-collar workers, to special faculty, you have a whole set of possibilities in the ecosystem. Is there any other gap in the ecosystem that you see?
The government is a big gap, because government is collecting this 2% education fare and they're not doing anything. So they are investing that money in all lot of bogus projects which doesn't really produce any results. So rather government should come up and say, okay, this education is mandated for everybody. Education is free up till say 12th class. So let us build the local content in Hindi, Marathi or Gujarati or all sort of languages. Give this business to small entrepreneurs, coaching classes, collect that content, join hands with the operator, tell them, yes, this is the content, and we deliver this content free of cost, and you tell me how much money you need for per terabyte data flow, right? And let these kids get the content through DTS, through internet, through mobile, through tablets, and whatever way it could be. Because we know that we have been talking that yes, we don't have faculty in rural areas. There is no mechanism wherein we can force them to really go over there. We ourselves don't want to really go and sit in a rural area. But sitting over here, we can't expect somebody to really go and teach. So this is the only way. So we have this mobile broadband, right? So let us use it. So government should invest that money rather than just creating brick mortar infrastructure. So government should take an investment.
Yeah, actually, there's a very interesting
And
point.
government should come out of the regulation. The moment government start regulating this mEducation, this will never grow. Because the way they have tried to regulate through AICTE or UGC, like across the world there are around 42,000 courses are available. And in India we don't have even 1% courses available. And bunch of guys sitting in AICTE and UGC trying to really control the whole education system, it is ridiculous. And no government has really allowed that. Even Supreme Court has really bashed government of India when they took ISB into court that you have no right to really run this PGP program, which is controversial MBA program. Supreme Court gave a judgment that government or AICTE has got no role to stop any individual being or society to run any professional course. It is hindering the growth of the nation.
Small point there, Bhupesh, because don't you think, given the propensity of fly-by-night operators to come into every sector where there is demand, there is a case for some kind of a quality monitoring, or because people invest in their kids when they get into education. They should not be exploited by somebody who just takes out a nice advertisement.
No,
on
the
TV.
government has been part of this fraud because government has given a license to give the certification, right? So once I get an endorsement of AICTE, I go out there and say this, look, this is AICTE Thappa I have got, and I have right to really charge 20 lakh rupees or 10 lakh rupees. Like Aegis is not endorsed by any of the government bodies. So today I need to really showcase what I can really deliver. I need to really give value for every penny I am charging. So, and yes, the mechanism in developed countries, they have different accreditation bodies which have got different levels, not one body. So if you have MBA accreditation, means you're the top class. If you're below that, you will charge according to that.
Or let's say in that case that even if you don't need regulation or government, you certainly need some kind of a quality monitoring
Yes.
agency. Like you have credit rating agencies in
Yes.
the financial ecosystem, you need some kind of an ecosystem.
Similar,
Yeah.
not one agency. There has to be
Maybe
multiple.
multiple
otherwise-
checks and balances
Yeah,
are
yeah.
the tweak. You can't have a Lokpal for
Yes,
ML.
certainly. No way.
I think we are sort of running out of time, but I think we could take a couple of questions from the audience. Anyone there who has some right thing to ask or say? Ah, everybody seems to be very happy with what we said. And, I think we are pretty much near our time limit, but I do want to ask the experienced Prakash Bajpai about what would you do if you were today the telecom minister of the country on education?
Telecom minister of the country, I don't want to be.
See, it suddenly realized that this is not a lucrative seat anymore, this is the hottest seat around. But I think not hotter than education, because there are 700 million kids out there who probably want more of that. On that note, let's end, and thank you very much for listening in. I hope I've kept you awake. Thank you.
Thank you.